Hi, welcome to another video from AplaneTruth.info. And on this day, July 4th, 1776, where the United States of America has got all their red, white, and blue flags flying as they think it's patriotic as we, the people, and the United States citizens are celebrating their independence, where nothing could be further from the truth. So let's debunk all this a little more. We're the Founding Fathers, ordinary people, and then we'll get into taxation, and then we'll get into the CAFR reports where they hide all the excess money, steal it, skim it from the top, put it in offshore accounts to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars. So this is from a piece last 2 years ago, 2015. Scott Walker, governor who's running for president, tells the audience a story about his first visit to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the Founding Fathers, all 55, 56 of them, all white men, all rich landowners, were trying to set up the we the people country and, omit women, omit Native Americans, omit slaves, but it's we the people that own land. So Walker has many times called the Founding Father ordinary people. And while campaigning, he emphasized that he himself didn't come from wealth or providence, even bragging that he bought a sweater for $1. So let's rewrite the little history here from what people are selling us into what's really happening. According to Brown University Emeritus History Professor Gordon Wood, author of Creation of the American Republic, the Founding Fathers, they were elite of the day involving the highest levels of society. And I'm not going to get into it here, but folks, just take a look at their homes. Here's George Washington's home, and the home was so big, it was known as Mount Vernon. The guy had a whole mountain. Mr. George, Founding Father, didn't tell a lie, worked for the Jesuits, Freemason. James Madison, fourth president, grew up on plantation his family owned in Montpelier. They had to have a whole name for it. Look at the size of these estates, folks. In 1732, James Madison became the sole proprietor when he was able to retire from public life after he spent his time in politics. And he spent the rest of his life expanding his mansion. He had tons of money, folks. Thomas Jefferson was said to be so broke that at his death, he had borrowed so much money from the government that they took all his books in his library and formed the Library of Congress. Yet look what he was able to build that still stands today on his estate called Monticello. Yeah, these are ordinary people, folks. John Adams, look at this estate, folks. Quincy, Massachusetts, just outside Boston. He bought it at the end of the Revolutionary War. Where did he get all this money? They were broke. They were done with scripts. Abraham Lincoln had to come up with the greenback. They were so broke. John Adams had a pretty good mansion here. Ben Franklin, he didn't go for the mansions too much. But then over here we got Alexander Hamilton, the British nobility, the man who founded the currencies, the banking system, and started the money system. His success in politics and law, making all this money, allowed this to commission architect John McComb to design a country home on his 50 acres of land in Upper Manhattan, what's now called Hamilton Heights in Harlem. So you see, folks, these guys just had incredible wealth. So let's get into the taxation without representation or taxation with representation. They both stink, and it's both to enrich the rich and keep us poor and enslaved. So let's get into it. So I want to start with on this July 4th, 1776, declared Day of Independence from the British. We're no independence whatsoever. We're massively in debt and we're being worked. This is from the Economic Collapse blog. Americans will spend more than 7 billion hours preparing for their taxes and hand over $4 trillion to federal, state, and local governments. This is your work. This is your earnings, folks. You're handing it over. 30% of what they earn will pay their income taxes. Most people work till April 15th, tax day, just to pay their taxes every year. By the time all is said and done, a significant portion of the population ends up paying more than half of what they earn to the government, which is, as I showed before, is a corporation in the previous videos. So you can look at all these taxes: airport transportation, cigarette tax, dog's license fees, employer Medicare tax, Social Security tax, estate tax. They tax you when you're born, tax you when you die. Federal unemployment taxes, fishing license taxes, gift taxes, gasoline taxes, garbage taxes, highway access, hazardous waste taxes, hotel taxes, hunting license tax, import tax, inheritance tax, individual health, inspection fees, IRS tax, penalty taxes, library taxes, liquor taxes, local corporate income, state School taxes, luxury taxes, marriage license taxes, Medicare taxes, parking meters, passport fees, property taxes. Think how people own property and how much revenue comes in, money comes in for property taxes, folks. It's amazing. Real estate taxes, toll booth taxes, state corporate taxes, state park entrance fees, telephone taxes, tire taxes, traffic fines, use taxes, utility taxes, vehicle registration, water rights, well permit fees, workman compensation, zoning permit. When the federal income tax was originally introduced a little more than 100 years ago, most Americans were taxed at 1%. The U.S. tax code is now 13.8 million words long. 75 years ago, it was 2 pages long. Today, it's 198 pages on the 1040. There's 4,428 changes to the tax code over the last decade. Ignorance is no excuse. The IRS has almost 2,000 different publication forms and instruction sheets. And here's, just an obvious one. 46 different tax professionals completed a tax return for a hypothetical household. All 46 came up with different results. This is also like how you allow you to drive at 65. The speed limit on a freeway might be 65, but everybody drives 75. Everybody's breaking the law in one way or the other. All right, so let's get into CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, where they skim money off the top, put in offshore accounts, and keep telling us we're broke when we are clearly not broke. So let's get into the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, or known as CAFR, C-A-F-R. But I just wanted to show you where we're ending up. The super rich hold over $32 trillion in offshore havens, so they don't have to pay taxes, siphoning off from the government, as we'll show. This was from from Reuters. The study estimating the extent of global private financial wealth held in offshore accounts, excluding non-financial assets such as real estate, gold, yachts, and racehorses, puts the sum at between $21 and $32 trillion. Now remember, folks, this is back in 2012, July 22nd. The report also highlights the impact of the balance sheets of 139 developing countries of money held in tax havens by the private elites, putting wealth beyond the reach of local tax authorities. The research estimates since the 1970s, the richest citizens of these 139 countries had amassed 7.3 to 9.3 trillion of unrecorded offshore wealth by 2010. Private wealth held offshore represents a huge black hole in the world economy. No shit. Well, let's see how they got all this money, folks. It's the CAFR. You need to learn about the CAFR reports, Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. All right. So this is from a post I did a couple years back, and all the credit goes to Walter Bruin and Clint Richardson out of Utah, who brought this to the public's attention, and I happened to pick it up, and it's really important that we start understanding where our money goes when we pay all our taxes and pay to the government. And as I proved in the other videos previous, U.S. government, Washington, D.C. is a corporation held in state by the City of London and the Vatican, and you can go back and do the research there. So, questions. Where does our state, muni, sales, corporate, income, schools, and tax money go when we pay it, okay? How come we're always broke? Where does the pension money go from a government holds of ours for decades? Where does our insurance money go? Where does the lottery money collected go? Where does the Social Security money go? Workman's compensation paying? Why do we pay taxes for schools if we have no children? Where does the money go if someone dies before collecting their Social Security, even though they paid in every year since they've worked until their death? If gas taxes go to fix roads and bridges, if property taxes and buildings go to build local utility and infrastructure, if sales taxes go to support local infrastructure, then where does our local, state, and federal taxes go that we pay into each year? All right, so let's get into it. So, again, this is from a post I'll put in here, but it's titled The Greatest Scam, We're Not Broke, Far From It. The easiest way to steal money from someone is them to never know they had it in the first place, okay? And just a sidebar, why we pay taxes, and every person will answer the exact same way. We've been programmed like little parrots. If we don't pay taxes, come on, folks, fill it in. If we don't pay taxes, we will go to jail. Even my fifth grade kids, I talk to, they say the same thing. By 5th grade, they all know they'll go to jail if they don't pay their taxes. It's been programmed into us. All right, so what if you were to find out that most, if not all state, county, and city governments in the United States are not broke? What if you were to find out that the money we've been paying into our governments is immediately invested with banks and laws, and that is passed that makes it illegal, a law is passed that makes it illegal to use the investment money to balance our budget deficits, and that each state has millions of shares of stocks and bonds and investment accounts that it could sell to balance the budget? These are investments accounts, folks. These aren't balancing budget accounts, and they differentiate it so they could hide it, as we'll get into. Now, what if you learn that there is enough money in these investment accounts to get completely out of debt and have money left over for a very sizable refund to every man, woman, and child, and that it represents 83% of the wealth in the stock and bond markets? What if you could find all this information in public records under each state and municipal's comprehensive annual financial reports, which anyone can Google and see for yourself? So what they did is they created these investments, so when the money comes in, they invest it, and when it's held, it's invested, and then they declared that you cannot use investment money to satisfy budget deficits. How cool is that? And this has been going on for decades. So every county, state, city, and municipality has a budget detailing costs and expenses. These budgets do not include total gross receipts. For many years, people accepted the accounting practices that guide these formal budgets. Walter Buren had spent over a decade investing the comprehensive annual financial reports. He was a former commodities advisor. The CAFR, or Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, is never mentioned in the media and virtually unknown to the public, but it confirms the existence of a parallel government accounting system that only shows the public one side of the story. So if they claim we're broke and running a deficit, but in fact we have billions and trillions of dollars in our budget surplus. These are in the investments accounts. Have you ever noticed that when a bond or proposition gets passed in your state for a construction or land management project, the actual project itself sometimes isn't scheduled to begin until months or years in the future? It's even written in most bills that the project won't start a far offset future date. So here comes the money in, they invest it, they collect interest, they make money on it, and then it can't be used to balance the budget. Only the money designated for the project is used. And that's not all. They have many different ways they do this. It's scamming or skimming off the top. The money for the proposition or bill is immediately released upon passage of legislation. The taxpayer money gets directly into what we call a holding account. Then it's invested, it gains interest, it builds up extreme wealth, and months of years of interest and capital gains on investments from the original taxpayer-funded money. When it comes time to use the original amount of money for the project, the capital gains of that supposedly dormant money are separated from the original amount into the holding account and stays in the government's discretionary investment coffers. And we'll get into discretionary funds in a little bit here. So the profit is no longer considered tax since it was earned by investment or by accrued interest. Here's how the legalese comes in. They call it an investment tax, not a budget. Okay? So mainly in other investment funds called fiduciary and enterprise funds, these are the two overarching funds that govern the money when they siphon it off when it comes in, grease the pockets of the in-the-know politicians and corporations and other people. Some open what are called self-insurance funds and then draw dividends for themselves and their fellow conspirators for the rest of their political careers by insuring themselves with their own insurance funds. And the cycle goes on and on and on. Get this. For the last 70 years. This is why the politicians never leave office, the Nancy Pelosi's, all of these guys that are in office never leave office because they're all in on the scam and they're getting paid incredible wealth. They're making incredible wealth on their self-insurance funds. So the money made on these individual government investments is not shown because it's not the taxpayer budget any longer. And that doesn't have to be accounted for by the taxpayers. Again, credit to Clint Richardson at a reality blog, which I'll put in the notes. He's done extensive work on this. And you can go through this. It's a pretty long piece I did on here. Where does all the taxpayer investment money go? Well, as I showed you, $32 trillion. This is back in 2012. Is hidden in offshore accounts. Much bigger than that. Here's Walter Buren's account, the biggest game in town. All right, so CAFR. What is the definition of CAFR? It's commingled fiduciary and enterprises funds, and it's the other set of books that includes all the government income, investment, and assets. Commingled funds are the fiduciary investment and enterprise like lottery, pensions, workman comps, public utilities, public golf courses, insurances, and tax revenues and expenditures. So fiduciary is investments, and the enterprise is all the other taxes. I owe, so it's off to work I go. All have been broken down into individual funds with their own profit and loss and balance sheets that require a comprehensive financial report to fully understand the total value. These reports are the only place we can view the full extent of the government's funds, investments, and holdings and the use of them. It's set up as a simple, quick evaluation to show total income, total assets, total investments, and total net worth. Never a peep about the public. Due to money control involved, the governments from all across the country have been developing their own non-tax income for over 65 years. If you want to search for the CAFR, any state, municipality, golf course, utility, whatever, just put in Comprehensive Annual Financial Report or CAFR, and you can see where the money is here. So the CAFR is set up to be an evaluation tool. As we said, it costs $30,000 a year to maintain a house. Say our salary or our income was $100,000 a year and we had $1 million in investments and our total net worth was $3 million. What if we talked only about our $30,000 budget as being our net worth? It would be ludicrous. But this is what the government does, okay? So is this an intentional scam? You betcha. This has been going on for 65, 70 years. They just happen to leave out decades and decades and decades of investment wealth that has been building up. The decades and decades of an enterprise and venture projects have created separately from the budgetary process. The CAFR was created by a group called the Government Financial Officers Association in 1946 is when they started accounting for it. And there are over 54,000 separate corporations within a local government. 54,000 in each local government, folks. Every CAFR report is a separate corporation. A city is a corporation, a state is a corporation, a school district is a corporation, each filing their own separate report. They see the tens of billions of dollars they never knew existed and they're floored. Then I bring to their attention, you're just looking at the state report. Let's look at Washington. It has $64 billion in liquid investment funds. Now the state of Washington has 2,300 separate local government corporations filing their own separate reports in the cities, counties, school districts, and authorities. Now remember, they get investments and they get interest on this, folks. So they make money on the money of other people's money. It's called OPM, other people's money. And then they invest it and declare we can't use it for the budgetary process. And so that's why we're always broke. The president of the country is a lawyer along with his wife, and that was back in the Clinton days. For more than half of all U.S. presidents, 56 of 100 senators, over 35% of the congressmen, and most state governors are all bar attorneys. BAR stands for British Accredited Registry, registered in the City of London, and they're all lawyers, so they all know about this, and that's why they are still in power. So commingled funds. They're government mutual funds, not included in the state budget reports. They're separate. So they have to keep, it's not allowed to be a part of the budget accounting, as I've said a few times now. And there's the two type of main funds, the enterprise fund and the fiduciary fund. Each time money comes in, there's a separate fund with a separate profit and loss of schedule of revenues and expenditures dedicated solely to that fund, but put under the overarching commingled funds. All right. So the enterprise funds is the operations of government. An enterprise CAFR is established to account for operations. The fiduciary fund is based for investments. These invest and use our money to make non-budget profits and investments partnering with private businesses, banks, and other countries. The fund accounting also has been applied for investment accounting, portfolio accounting, and security accounting, all synonyms describing the process of accounting for a portfolio of investments such as securities, commodities, and real estate held in an investment fund such as a mutual fund or hedge fund. All right, so let's take a look at California and how this actually goes about in breaking down. 2-3 years ago, the California was in a terrible state budget in 2008, 2009, and they were closing down California parks and said they had discovered that there was an excess of deficit of $55 million. Only problem is the Sun Mercury News reported that there was $2.3 billion found in 500 accounts under the CAFR State Park Fund. So this was brought up, and then it was shuttered by immediately the article was closed. I happened to catch it and copy it, but $2.3 billion in the state park fund, while they're declaring there's a $55 million deficit. This is just one example of how they do it. And here I list all the money in the different funds, or Clint Richardson did actually, I'm sorry, and posted this all, and this will be in the show notes. So just look how much money we're talking about here. So here we have over $20 billion in the total special revenue fund. And then we go into the enterprise funds. This is just California, folks. 34 million, 3 billion, 159 million. Then we get to the pension and employee trust benefits. These are paid into money that gets invested, and then they tell us there's no money there, folks, because they steal it and put it in their offshore accounts. Judges Retirement Fund, all of these pension funds, University of California Fund, $55 billion, folks, and they're raising tuitions on everybody. And Janet Napolitano, the Jesuit running the University of California, stealing funds and having lavish parties and whatnot. It's all a scam. It's all a scam, folks. We got to wake up. All right, so this is under hiding the money in thousands of government funds. So government accounting is different. A government entity has many coffee cans or funds, and money comes in and goes out. A big government entity has hundreds, even thousands of coffee cans. What money is allowed to go in a particular coffee can is determined by law, and you can't just take money from one and put it in another. The general fund can take money from anywhere, taxes, fees, assessments, and so on, but the debt service fund can only take money from certain sources. The revenue fund can only take money from certain revenues. A special assessment fund can take it from that particular assessment. This is the game they play. To help you in understanding, let's say you have a checking account with $1,000 in a savings account and $10,000 in two different banks. You only reported to the government that you had $1,000 as your net worth because you didn't want to use your savings to pay your bills, taxpayer obligations. You'd be audited and put under a federal debtor's prison. But for the government, this simple designation of non-governmental or non-taxpayer income and investment returns allows them to hide all of this wealth from the people in the budget report while never mentioning the funds and wealth that's in the CAFR report. This is our money we've paid into, folks. This is our money. So Clint Richardson on page 107 of California CAFRs shows $6 billion annual interest cost and $164 million in state debt are also cover-ups when contrasted with taxpayers' investment. A sharp irony is that many of California's investments are in other government debt securities. This means a net loss to taxpayers as one group pays another interest minus the cost of managing the debt. Now remember, when every investment banker does a transaction, they get a fee on top of this. This is where they create all this wealth. California has over 5 million shares of Morgan Stanley stock and Bank America stock and Citicorp. They could sell off all of these and have incredible wealth, as I'll show you. And each California, here it is down here, would receive over $50,000 if $600 billion was returned to California's 12 million households. Yet nobody even knows about this. Our pension funds, we could access our pension funds and the money that the local municipalities have, and we could keep it at home instead of investing in offshore accounts, investing in international funds, national funds, and even state funds. What if the local municipalities were able to take care of their own with I know in Mendocino County, there's over $230 million in the pension funds, and we had a choice of how we invested it in our local communities? Just think about that for a moment, folks. We could change everything in a heartbeat. The state claims they need to overtax Californians 320 times just to pay their bills. All right, so let's move on. I can get going on this for days. So let's add up what we found here and see how if California could pay off its debt tomorrow and never have to issue a taxpayer bond again. So here we see the special revenues funds. This is all money sitting there that they all get interest on and put in their offshore accounts, folks. Every day, it just rings up. They don't do anything. They steal our money, putting in these separate funds by law, and then they just take it. I don't want to get into the California tax fund, but here, let's take a look at LA. The county of LA had a budgetary basis in 2007 of $17.5 billion. From 2008 to 2011, LA promoted how they were pulling in the belt and how they had to pull in the belt and cutting back expenses. The reality of the situation for those 5 years in the CAFR report showed that they increased the budgetary income from $17.5 billion to $25.8 billion, an increase of $8.3 billion or 47% increase. As they promoted the population, they were in dire straits and having to cut back, and we have to pay more and more. Are you getting how this works? I hope so. So money, like just here is this CalPERS just happens to own 5 million shares of Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan 11 million shares. These are all money that they bought these stocks with our money on, folks, called them investments and said we can't use it to balance the budget, yet it's all in Wall Street. It's all in the Wall Street game, okay? So here's how's the California pension fund scam. It's a special case. This is a worldwide pension system. So we're under the Roman Social Security, and it's a worldwide pension system. And I'm going to show you how the Social Security is under a worldwide a pension system that we're under. So the taxpayer money is being contributed to these pension funds with no benefit to the majority of tax holders in the state. The employees themselves have no equity in the taxpayer portion of contributions that are given over to the pension funds and is the property of the government fund, not the employees. So they put it in the investment accounts and you never see it again. So let's look how much they've contributed. $18 billion, $6 billion from corporations from employees, taxpayers $12 billion. Remember that the so-called budget deficit was quoted by the governor in 2012 was only $15.7 billion, revised from $9.2 billion. So here's contributions totaling, what is that, $37 billion. And they're saying that the budget deficit was $9.2 billion. We could pay off the deficit in a heartbeat. This means that 37.6 million people lived in California as of July 1st, 2011, paid over $12 billion to support state employees by allowing the California government to give their taxpayer-funded money to the pension and fund systems. Okay? I hope you're getting upset. You should be. All right, so I want to go over how the California lottery works. Now, this is another scam. So they have a lottery in every country or in every state. A lot of counties, I think, are doing them too. So here you pay in your money over 6 months. Let's say they take in $25, $30 million or something over this period of time. Well, every time the money comes in, every dollar, every day, it gets invested. They have overnight investment rates. You can make money in a matter of hours. So as soon as the money comes in over months, it gets invested. So the lottery fund cash is put in the electric fund transfer and the risk management fund and the California Police Officer Memorial Fund and the surplus money investment fund. California has taken in $59 billion in lottery proceeds since 1985. They're required to contribute almost $30 billion to the education fund, and $30.5 billion is paid out to lucky winners over time, with $19 billion in operating and administration expenses. $19 billion in operating and administering expenses. Just give out a lottery ticket and give people back the money they took in. Crazy, huh? Lottery money comes in through the ETF and is put in a fund invested by the state. Weeks and months of investment increases. The government takes and keeps the investment income. Then a winner is declared, but by law, they must pay half, close to half on that kind of money in taxes. So the government simply says, would you like to pay out over 26 years where they can take your money that they've taken in? Let's say it's $50 million. They're paying you $25 million over time, so they get to invest it. Or they can pay you the $25 million out of the $50 million, and they get to keep the $25 million in investment funds. All the while, they made money while investing your money as it came in while they were making the lottery until the date it was funded. See how this works? So the education fund is a vague term. No money goes to the schools as stated. They can call the fund anything they want, but the proof is in the pudding. Where does it go? Every single winner is going to have 25 to 30% to the federal government, which is a huge reason they allowed legalized gambling. Okay? The state then takes the investment money and invests it in the federal securities through banks who make bank on fees. All right? If you read your state constitution, you'll find that the concept of personal property does not really exist. It was required for the people of a territory to give all lands to the United States. This I covered in the previous, that we do not own our land. We are just simply tenants. Banks do not lose anything from a foreclosure if you default on a loan, because money is created when banks make loans to persons. Since the money is created in a bank loan, the bank has not loaned you any of its own money, which is why it needs no reserves to cover the loan. It monetizes your loan application and documents through the Fed, and then as a middleman, loans you the newly created money out of nowhere. The bank has then got a zero balance at the time of the loan. The contract, you agree via contract to pay the bank, which is all profit, both principal and interest. The bank is just helping and scamming you to create the money that technically you could create by being your own bank. The bank has no interest in seeing you succeed in making your loan payments. They would much rather have you create more money for a new loan for which, again, it will use none of its own money. This is why they keep loaning money, $1 trillion for prime interest car loans, student debt, 1.3 trillion, home loans. This is how they get us. The whole thing is just a big scam, folks. There's no free country, and you not own anything that can't be taken away. You have no private property unless you're willing to fight. Sadly, most are not. So anyway, I could go on, but it's all ruled by the Vatican. And here I want to get into the Vatican claims they're 19 million in red. Give me a break. They say they're trying to help the poor, and they're preachers for the poor. Yet they hold more wealth than all of us combined in a factor of huge. They could sell just a few of their paintings in the Vatican Library vault and pay off all the world's debt, end hunger and whatnot. Just to note, the Vatican is a corporation. The Vatican government both operate as non-profit and for-profit. So what they did is they created a corporation for an individual and created a corporation for the federal government. So both have an annual financial report. Both the Vatican and the government have real estate holdings. They both promote debt while hiding their investment asset balances. They both have a central bank which bails them out in the moment of needs, then expects Catholic or taxpayers to pay the bill. They openly lie by omission to the people of the earth. Both use depreciation of capital assets to show on their financial reports a liability against the other assets in order to increase reportable value of these investments. It's all tricks, guys. Both create budgets that are falsely imploded with such things as future liabilities so as to justify its raising of taxes and its request for tithing. Give us, please, we're so broke. Both create separate sub-corporations with their own financial statements as for profit entities, but to not use these profits for the benefits of the people. Both lay off employees with the excuse of budget shortfalls. Both own and control the media through stock investment and coercion and use it to hide all of this from the people by keeping them entertained with everything but this information. It's ironic that the Vatican, we can see perhaps the best example of how government corporation lies by the act of utter and ridiculous disassociation and non-disclosure of true wealth. And yes, the Vatican is a corporation. It's a nation state. It also calls itself a church. So I'll put this in the show notes. There's a lot more here for you to go through, including how the Social Security is it's $2.6 trillion in assets, and that money is ours, but they put it in investment accounts, so we can't get it. So I'll put this all in here. You can read more, but please share this with people. Here's another one from Carl Henman. Using data from the Bank of International Settlement, IMF, World Bank, Chief Economist McKinsey James Henry reports that 1% have deposited 21 trillion to 32 trillion in tax havens to evade taxes. Okay, the so-called rainy day accounts, $32 trillion, are tragic comic in non-disclosure and non-performance for budget, infrastructure, and pension filing. And I said before, California has $8 trillion in surplus. This is as of 2012. So you can read more and more about how this goes on and the rainy day funds excuse and whatnot. But I think you get the idea now how money is skimmed off the top. And get into the Social Security. In all the countries, they've created this International Social Security Fund, or the International Social Security Association, again, a corporation, where they can funnel the money off even further. And so the chances of it getting back are even more harder to trace as they put layers and layers in corporations and whatnot. But please read the show liner notes and let's yell fire, folks. It's time to start screaming about this. The taxation is slavery, and we need to wake up as to where our hard work and labor is going. And it's not going back to us, and they're just going to keep bleeding us until we yell stop. It's up to us. It's up to you. It's up to me. I hope this helps further us down the road, and we can stop funding the madness, funding the bombing of brown people, funding the rich people getting wealthier at all our expense, because at the top, all they're going to do is take more, folks. I guarantee it. This is A Plain Truth Out. Peace. Catch you on the next video. Thanks for listening.
take care. Wake up and make it right. Give us hope. It's time that we take care. Help us with our foolish pride. Wise ones. Give us hope. Make it right. To make this world a better place for me and you. To bring a little peace inside of each new day. To grow up in a world that's full of harmony. I dream of
Six of them, all white men, all rich landowners. We're trying to set up the we the people country, and omit women, omit Native Americans, omit slaves, but it's we the people that own land. So Walker is many times called the founding father of ordinary people, and while campaigning, he emphasized that he himself didn't come from wealth or providence, even bragging that he bought a sweater for $1. So let's rewrite the little history here from what people are selling us into what's really happening. According to Brown University Emeritus History Professor Gordon Wood, author of Creation of the American Republic, the founding fathers, they were elite of the day involving the highest levels of society. And I'm not going to get into it here, but folks, just take a look at their homes. Here's George Washington's home, and the home was so big, it was known as Mount Vernon. The guy had a whole mountain. Mr. George, founding father, didn't tell a lie, worked for the Jesuits. Ben Franklin, he didn't go for the mansions too much. But then over here we got Alexander Hamilton, the British nobility, the man who founded the currencies, the banking system, and started the money system. His success in politics and law, making all this money, allowed this to commission architect John McComb to design a country home on his 50 acres of land in Upper Manhattan, what's now called Hamilton Heights in Harlem. So you see, folks, these guys just had incredible wealth. So let's get into the taxation without representation or taxation with representation. They both stink, and it's both to enrich the rich and keep us poor and enslaved. So let's get into it. So I want to start with on this July 4th, 1776, declared Day of Independence from the British. We're no independence whatsoever. We're massively in debt and we're being worked. This is from the Economic Collapse blog. American Freemason. James Madison, 4th president, grew up on plantation his family owned in Montpelier. They had to have a whole name for it. Look at the size of these estates, folks. In 1732, James Madison became the sole proprietor when he was able to retire from public life after he spent his time in politics. And he spent the rest of his life expanding his mansion. He had tons of money, folks. Thomas Jefferson was said to be so broke that at his death, he had borrowed so much money from the government that they took all his books in his library and formed the Library of Congress. Yet look what he was able to build that still stands today on his estate called Monticello. Yeah, these are ordinary people, folks. John Adams, look at this estate, folks. Quincy, Massachusetts, just outside Boston. He bought it at the end of the Revolutionary War. Where did he get all this money? They were broke. They were done with scripts. Abraham Lincoln had to come up with the greenback. They were so broke. John Adams had a pretty good mansion here. Americans will spend more than 7 billion hours preparing for their taxes and hand over $4 trillion to federal, state, and local governments. This is your work. This is your earnings, folks. You're handing it over. 30% of what they earn will pay their income taxes. Most people work till April 15th, tax day, just to pay their taxes every year. By the time all is said and done, a significant portion of the population ends up paying more than half of what they earn to the government, which is, as I showed before, is a corporation in the previous videos. So you can look at all these taxes: airport transportation, cigarette tax, dog's license fees, employer Medicare tax, Social Security tax, estate tax. They tax you when you're born, tax you when you die. Federal unemployment taxes, fishing license taxes, gift taxes, gasoline taxes, garbage taxes, highway access, hazardous waste taxes, hotel taxes, hunting license tax, import tax, inheritance tax, individual health, inspection fees, IRS tax, penalty taxes, library taxes, liquor taxes, local corporate. Hi, welcome to another video from AplaneTruth.info. And on this day, July 4th, 1776, where the United States of America has got all their red, white, and blue flags flying as they think it's patriotic as we, the people, and the United States citizens are celebrating their independence, where nothing could be further from the truth. So let's debunk all this a little more. We're the Founding Fathers, ordinary people, and then we'll get into taxation, and then we'll get into the CAFR reports where they hide all the excess money, steal it, skim it from the top, put it in offshore accounts to the tune of tens of trillions of dollars. So this is from a piece last 2 years ago, 2015. Scott Walker, governor who's running for president, tells the audience a story about his first visit to Independence Hall in Philadelphia, where the Founding Fathers, all 55, 56,